What's up, y'all, and welcome to another installment of the For the Gram podcast. This is the show where I, Jaksyn, your host, am going to be taking you through a topic of interest to me. Whether that's something new happening in the world lately, some kind of hip trend, something I just find interesting, but it's all going to be relevant enough for the gram. In this week's episode, we just celebrated the turn of the year into 2025 from 2024. And so I thought it would be fun if today we did a little recap episode, just a little 3 things you need to know of 2024, if you will. But it's going to be a little bit more than 3 things, but it's just going to be some fun, interesting tidbits that happened in the world in 2024. Before, of course, we move into 2025, which we're already in for at least a little while now, but that all being said, there's still some interesting things that happened, like going back to February and January and all those things. We had the Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl again. That was crazy to start off the year. I was not a real big fan of that whole thing, but it's fine. It's whatever. They're a decent football team, so they played well. It was a good game. But for the 49ers, as a Seahawks fan, why are you asking for the ball? Like, if you know anything about the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs, it's that they're gonna get the ball at some point in overtime, and they're going to score. They will score. Why do you go first? Why don't you wait until they're done, and then you can go and score with a 2-point conversion afterwards? But that's just me. I had nothing to do with the decision there, and I think it showed in the overall victory of who took it home. But anyway, that was like one of the first things that I remember about 2024 was that, first of all, Jannik Sinner won the Australian Open in early February, I think. He beat Novak Djokovic. That was super interesting. Also, we had a big year for the sport of tennis because Rafael Nadal and Andy Murray both retired. So we lost 2 big greats in the sport of tennis, which I like a lot, as was covered in this show at some point before. But anyway, it's like there was a lot of stuff that happened in 2024, and it's like when you look back at some of those moments from like the early parts of the year, you're like, wait, that was this year? What's even going on? Like, are you kidding me? But anyway, that was just a big thing for the beginning of the year in the sports world. We had those types of events happening. Like I said, it's weird having a look back at the year that you had previously. Like, I don't remember a lot of what happened at the beginning of the year, and I think that's fine, because it's like time moves forward, and you never realize how long a year is until you sit there at the end of December and look back and you're just like, whoa, we had a lot of time since then. Like, I think, in my opinion, nothing shows you how long a year is until it's like a Winter Olympics year, because you're just sitting there in February watching winter sports. And then by the time you get to December, you're like, that was this year? Are you kidding me? But we'll get to the Olympics again here in a second. But before we get into any like newsworthy things, I wanted to go through a couple like personal lists throughout the episode too, because there were some things that I definitely branched out on in the year, whether that's like moments or things that I liked or things that I think you guys as listeners should check out if you haven't already. So the first list that I'm going to get into is notable celebrities that passed away this past year, because it was kind of a hectic year for famous people passing away. Like, most notably, the very end of 2024, we lost former President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, who, in my opinion, is the nicest guy, but the worst president. Like, he was just a little peanut farmer that we were trying to usher into office after Nixon and the Watergate scandal and all that sort of thing. But he died this year, which means he was, I believe he was 100. If he wasn't 100, he was 99. He was up there, because I think he was born in 1924. But I could be wrong there. I'm 90% sure he was 100, which is crazy, because then he was a president who lived to be 100, which doesn't happen a lot anymore. But yeah, we lost Jimmy Carter, and then towards the beginning of the year, we lost Carl Weathers, who is an actor. A lot of the people on this list are actors and like pop culture figures, just because those are the people in the mainstream, I guess. So we had Carl Weathers pass away towards the beginning of the year, which was kind of a trendsetter for what was going to be the rest of the year in terms of people passing away and stuff like that, because like we had Liam Payne of One Direction. He fell off of the balcony of his hotel room, which was a little sketchy, but that's fine. It's whatever. It was a little sketchy, but we looked past that after like a month of all of it going down and stuff like that. And then we had Maggie Smith die earlier this year, which was sad. It was Professor McGonagall. She was in Downton Abbey and all that stuff. Very popular British actress. She passed away this year too, which was unfortunate. I think she was in her 80s as well, so she was up there. Liam Payne died at like 33. He was rather young, and so it was super, super unfortunate when that happened. It's like when Matthew Perry died, it was like, whoa. A bit of a culture shock moment, because it's like people of the younger celebrity generation that were passing instead of like people older and stuff like that, which rounding out at the number one of most notable people that passed away this past year with James Earl Jones, voice of Darth Vader, voice of Mufasa, Sandlot, Field of Dreams, all those other types of movies and things like that. He passed away, which was really, really sad. It's a big hit to the pop culture industry, but it was really unfortunate how many people we had to see go this year, and those were just 5 notable ones that were 5 notable ones that I wanted to bring a little bit of attention to. What else happened this year? The Summer Olympics. I said I would get back to the Olympics. The Summer Olympics happened in Paris this year, sparking notables like gymnastics taking the world by storm with Steven Nedorosik, the male pommel horse specialist out of Penn State, I believe, is where he went to college, goes to college. And then, of course, the female gymnastics team led by Simone Biles. And they all did very, very well. America placed in gold medals by leaps and bounds above the second highest country, which I believe was China. I want to say it was China or France. I don't remember off the top of my head who placed first, who placed second, who placed third. But one of my favorite things to watch in the Olympics is fencing. And I covered that a little bit in my Olympics recap episode. But fencing is where you get countries that are like less typically winning medals to start winning medals. Like US had a lot of good people fencing, which was crazy. But then also you had, I think the final for women's was Egypt against Hungary, which is like, what? That's insane. I never even thought Egypt had people at the Olympics, but they were fencing and it was super cool. And then I like watching water polo, and track was insane, and swimming was crazy. Leon Marchand was kind of insane, watching him in the French swimming races and stuff like that. So the Olympics was big this year. And then we had the pole vaulter. We had the pole vaulter who got disqualified for knocking the bar off the top support thing. So that was kind of crazy. We had the one archer guy. That was insane too. Oh man, the Olympics was just crazy. And then the river was like giving people infections, so they couldn't have people dive in the river or like swimming in the river. That was crazy. And then man, there was a lot that happened with the Olympics, and so it was a big part of the year, definitely, because it's a cultural phenomenon. Like, people stop doing things to watch the Olympics and stuff like that. Speaking of cultural phenomenons, we had UConn, the University of Connecticut, take their second straight NCAA March Madness title. I haven't talked about March Madness much on this podcast because we haven't got to March yet, but I will probably as we get closer to that point. I love March Madness. That is probably one of my favorite cultural sports phenomenon experiences to run with as a fan, because it's the sport for what I like to call it. It's the sport for bandwagons. It's the people who don't really care much about college basketball until the NCAA tournament, and then they start caring and pick teams, root for teams. It's interesting to see all the different ways people fill out their brackets, what they base it off of, and things like that. So I will definitely be talking more about March Madness in the coming months here, because it's already coming up really, really quick, and I'm super, super excited for it. Also, we're going to have an Iditarod episode, because Dallas CV won the Iditarod again this year, which, if you don't know what the Iditarod is, stay tuned, because I'm going to talk about it. I'm a real nerd about some of this stuff, but Dallas CV won the Iditarod again, which he has not won since, I believe, 2016. He won 2 back-to-back years, and he's one of the greatest mushers to ever do it. The Iditarod is sled dog races, if you're unfamiliar, but yeah, the Iditarod is super, super fun. If you've never experienced it before, just you wait. I love this. It's a very odd spectator sport, but I love it so much. And then it typically falls over my spring break, so I get to like take in some of it before I go back to school, and so it's wonderful. It's just great. So that's March. Yeah, March Madness. We got UConn again. They don't have a lot of the same players coming back because some of them got drafted, so we're going to see what happens there. Bronny James got drafted out of USC. He's currently in the G Leagues for the Lakers. I don't think he's ever going to get to play with LeBron, but we'll see how that goes. The Timberwolves have been kind of going insane. They made a playoff run last year. They're in contention to do it again this year, but we'll see how that goes. A lot of Minnesota sports teams have been like gunning and running this year. Like the Twins kind of crapped the bed at the last second against the last 3 series of their stint, so the Guardians made it instead of them. But the Vikings have been doing really well. The Wild have been doing really well. The Timberwolves are doing really well. So it's like, it's interesting to see all these Minnesota sports teams that kind of like seemed mediocre the entirety of my life to just like popping off a little bit, showing some athleticism, like building around certain players and things like that. So that's super, super fun to see as well. What else happened in 2025? Not 2025. What else happened in 2024? There was a lot. There's a lot that happened. Pop culture moment. You got a bunch of tiny baby animals that people got obsessed with because it's the age of the internet and all that sort of stuff. So we had Mudang, the baby pygmy hippo, who was in the one Indonesian zoo, and she was like so small and it was taking the world by storm. And then towards the beginning of the year, I believe, there was Pesto, the penguin. There was a baby penguin with like all these fluffy feathers on it and stuff, and his name was Pesto. And then, like, of course, like I said, Mudang, the baby pygmy hippo that I talked about on this show, I believe. But yeah, baby animals, man. There are a lot of crazy baby animals, and you haven't really seen much of them since, like, what was the one? Do y'all remember the dolphin from A Dolphin Tale? When Winter was its name, when that dolphin had a baby, that was like all over the news and stuff like that for the longest time. And so it's like crazy to think about what the world can do with just this small little bit of information. And then, like, it was a big year for music too. I'm not the most diverse guy when it comes to music in that world, but there was the Kendrick Lamar and Drake diss track off thing that happened, and apparently Kendrick won, which is why he's performing at the Super Bowl this year or something. I don't even know. And then there was like Brat Summer with Charlie XCX and her new album and stuff like that everybody kind of went insane over. And then there was the Sabrina Carpenter album. I think it was called Short and Sweet, which that was the tour. I don't know if that was the name of the album, but that was definitely the tour. And so Espresso was the song. Yeah. That was a big one for Sabrina Carpenter. So we had like Sabrina Carpenter, we had Chappell Roan with Hot to Go, and then we had Charlie XCX with the Brat Summer stuff, and then there was obviously the Kendrick Lamar and Drake stuff that was going on, and then yeah, it was a big year for music. The concept album for the musical Epic ended this year. They finished all 9 sagas of it with Jorge Rivera Arons. He wrote all of it on TikTok and like used TikTok as a way of getting people to audition for it and stuff like that, which I think is a really, really cool concept. Is that you use the internet to get your people to audition for your show, because then it's like you can have people from all over the world in this tiny little production. And it was a concept album for a musical about Homer's The Odyssey, so following Odysseus in his travels back from Troy to Ithaca. And it was really good. I like it a lot. There are some songs that I don't really need to listen to again, but there are a lot of songs that I'm like, this is super, super catchy and definitely for this generation of music. And so I'd highly recommend listening to it if you haven't already, but it's really, really good. And I keep forgetting that The Great Gatsby opened this year. Like, Broadway is just really taking books that you read in middle school and high school and developing them all into musicals, because The Great Gatsby opened this year and The Outsiders opened this year, and that won a bunch of Tonys, and I was super, super pumped for that. But Jeremy Jordan is finally leaving The Great Gatsby after almost a year of doing it, which is kind of insane. But they're replacing him with I don't remember what his name was, but he played Fiyero in one of the Broadway versions of Wicked, which is super, super cool. But I'll get back to Wicked in a second. But that is like music. Like music went kind of crazy. Funny thing, Usher was the performer at the halftime show in February. And this tells you how much I don't listen to music. In preparation for the Super Bowl halftime show, I listened to all of the Usher songs that I knew were going to be performed in the halftime show. So it was like people prepping for concerts and stuff. I did that for Usher's halftime show. And Usher was my number one artist of 2024 because I don't listen to music all that often. And my Spotify was like, you listen to all of this Usher. And I was like, what? That's insane, dude. I didn't know I listened to that much Usher. And they were like, well, you did. He's your number one artist. And I was like, that's wild. I don't like that. Why are you doing this to me? But it's whatever. Spotify Wrapped. My Spotify Wrapped is always super, super underwhelming in comparison to other people's. So I don't share it with a lot of people. What else? What else in music? Linkin Park came back. Released a new album from Zero with their new female vocalist, Emily Armstrong. That's kind of cool. Coldplay released a new album, and they said they're going to be done after the next one, I think, which is really, really sad because I feel like Coldplay and like Maroon 5 are those bands that have like been around forever. Like my entire life, they've just been there. They've existed. And so it's going to be weird when those bands start to like dissipate and like aren't touring anymore. But that's also kind of insane to think about. What else in music? Anything else in music? JoJo Siwa did her rebrand this year. That's insane to think about. That was this year. Like, JoJo Siwa, who was a music personality for the Nickelodeon, and she did like a bunch of child-friendly television and stuff like that. She decided to rebrand herself for a more adult type audience, and she made a music video that was not the greatest in like quality or narratively or anything like that. And so she got a lot of backlash for that, and that was this year. That's insane. I don't like that. I don't like to think about that. Oh my goodness. And it's still like a cultural phenomenon, apparently, that she did that. That's wild. I can't even I'm in shock right now. I can't believe that was even a thing, like that was happening. That's insane. Oh my goodness. The next list of things that I kind of wanted to touch on was top 5 movies of the year, in my opinion, from like the ones that I saw versus the ones that I heard things about. So 2024 was a wild year for movies. It was crazy intense, and I saw a lot of movies this year. I think I saw 30 movies this year, like, that came out, and that's crazy. I haven't like been that guy that like goes to movies all the time except like these past couple years. Now that I've been like a media major, I've gone out and seen so many movies, but it's hard because like I don't go see movies when I'm in school because I just like need to see them on my own time. But top 5 movies that I saw this year from like that were released this year. Number 5, I'm gonna go Furiosa, the Mad Max saga installment, which had Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth in it. It was really good. I liked it a lot. I was never much for the Mad Max films until this year, just because it's chaos. It's so much happening all at once, but I think it's beautiful color wise. Like, it's insane. And then Furiosa was a prequel to Mad Max, I believe, which was Charlize Theron's character, Furiosa, hence the name. It was getting a lot of bad reviews just because they were hyping up Anya Taylor-Joy being in it, and she barely spoke a word, which was fine. It was okay, but I really, really liked it. Number 4, The Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt. I really, really liked The Fall Guy. It's a love letter to the stunt community, and I love the stunt community, like stunt doubles and actors that do stunts and things like that. Super, super cool, super professional. I love everything that they do. They're finally going to get an Oscar category, and I'm super happy about that because I've been waiting for an Oscar category for stuntmen for years now. And so I'm so looking forward to when that happens at the Oscars. Number 3, Wicked. I loved Wicked so much. It was a musical adaptation of the Broadway show that I saw my senior year of high school, and I loved it. It was beautiful. It added so much to the adaptation that I loved so much in the first place, and it was just a nice telling of it from a cinematic angle, and I really liked watching it with people that had not seen the show before, and it's really interesting watching all of this like pan out in terms of like who's all seen it, what everybody wants to know about it and things like that. And then number 2, Dune Part 2. It was beautiful. I loved this movie. The Hans Zimmer score, so good. I was not much of a fan of the first one, but this second one, the only thing that took me out of it was Christopher Walken, and if you've seen the movie, you know why. But yeah, that one was really, really good. That one was really strong. It was a movie that I thought was going to win so many Oscars at the beginning of the year, and then the rest of the year happened, and it was wild. I did not even think about it. Going into number 1, I'm going to list some honorable mentions here just because I could not fit all of the movies that I wanted to on this list, but I tried my absolute hardest. Honorable mentions, there's a movie called Arthur the King that came out with Mark Wahlberg. It was about a dog, and that one was really nice. I liked watching that one a lot. What else? Honorable mentions, Inside Out 2 was really, really good. That one was good, and Deadpool and Wolverine was really good, but it's not like worthy of the top 5 in my opinion. I'm not a Deadpool guy, like for humor wise. Wolverine is epic as ever, but they made too many jokes about I watched it with my sisters, and they were like, can we laugh at this? Is this okay? Other honorable mention, Carry On, which is a movie starring Taron Egerton and Jason Bateman. It just came out. It's a like Die Hard for my generation, which I really like. That movie was really nice. I was pleasantly surprised by that one. In terms of like the quality of it and like what the story was going to be and things like that. And then number 1 is Twisters with Glenn Powell and Daisy Edgar Jones. That one was my favorite movie of the year. I love effects in movies now, like way more so than I ever really have, now that they start to do them more like practically, as opposed to VFX and like artificial effects and stuff like that. But Twisters was like a really shocking plot for me, and I was all for it. And so that's why Twisters was my number one. And then now I'm going to go into 5 movies that it's embarrassing I've made it to 20 years of life without seeing these movies. Number 5, the original Halloween from 1978 with Michael Myers. Never saw it before this year. I'm not a big horror guy. I had to watch it for class. And so, like, jump scares have never really been my thing. And so I just never really watched a lot of horror movies until, like, the past 2 years when I was like, let's see what all the fuss is about. Some of them are just bad. Like, I don't like them. Halloween is up there. Friday the 13th, didn't like that. Just, it was not the greatest. Saw 3 through 9, terrible. Scream 2 through 5, not a fan. Yeah, horror movies just aren't really my thing. 4, Fight Club. Again, I don't like that type of movie. David Fincher, like, I respect him for all that he does. The Killer was great. Gone Girl was fine for 80% of it. But Fight Club, like, the twist was crazy. I was like, what? Like, the ending was insane. But I'm breaking the first 2 rules of Fight Club by talking about it right now, so I'm just going to shut my mouth really quick and move on to number 3, Treasure Planet. I know some of my friends are going to be screaming at me through their microphones right now. Sorry I can't hear you, but, like, I understand. I feel your pain. I've never seen this movie. It's Disney's version of Treasure Island, but, like, space pirates in the sky, and I love it so much. It was beautiful. I want them to make a live action version of it. Take the budget that you have for the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie and put it into making a live action version of Treasure Planet that will actually be live action. And I would reinvest a lot into the Disney Corporation again, because I will trust their movies. If they make a good live action Treasure Planet, please do that. Number 2, 7. I haven't seen 7 until this year. It was very early on in the year when I watched it. Morgan Freeman, amazing. Brad Pitt, not really a fan of Brad Pitt's acting. I hate to say it. Kevin Spacey, not really a fan of him as a person, but that was a different time. The 90s were a different time. But 7 is probably one of my top 20 movies of all time now. Like, it was really, really good. I'm all for a thriller with, like, twist endings and all that stuff, so I'm surprised I haven't watched it until this point. But I really liked it. It was good. It was super, super strong. But yeah, and then number 1, the most embarrassing movie that I have made it to 20 years of life without seeing, The Godfather. I watched it for class. I did it. But I had never seen The Godfather before this year, and I think that's fine. I am, like, pleasantly surprised by it. I figured a lot of what it was going to be, but Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, sorry, not Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and, Marlon Brando and Al Pacino and all those guys, like, they brought it. It was a decent movie. Like, I liked it more than I thought I was going to. It came out in the 70s, I think, and it's a long movie. It's 3 hours long, but it was decent. I respect it for what it was at the time. I want to see part 2 because I've heard part 2 is way better than part 1, and I think that might help me a little bit. That one has De Niro in it, and he won an Oscar for it, and then I think Marlon Brando won an Oscar for Don Corleone as well. And so I'm hoping that 2 is better. But 1 was fine. It was serviceable. I'm kind of embarrassed that I hadn't seen it until now, just because of how iconic this movie is. It's a lot of movies on this list that I definitely should have seen before this year, but I didn't because I'm a sheltered human being, and so I didn't really venture out much until I started watching my own movies when I was 17, 18. And that was mainly through Netflix. My first rated R movie that I ever saw was Good Will Hunting. I love that movie. First rated R movie I ever saw in theaters was Jordan Peele's Nope, which was a waste of money. I should not have gone to see that movie, but it was fine. Yeah, talking about how I don't like horror movies. My first rated R movie in theaters is a horror movie. But that was just a product of the time. That was what it was. I've never been ID'd at a rated R movie, which makes me feel like an adult. That's cool. 2024 though, it was insane. It went by so quick. I learned a lot about myself, as you often do in 2020, as you often do in just a year. I'm a junior in college right now. I was a sophomore when I started this year. I've grown a lot. I'm about to turn 21 in a couple months here. That's insane. I went to go see The Ark in Kentucky. That was really cool. It's just a big old boat with all the story and history to it, and it's life size, and I'm like, how do we even know what a cubit was? The Bible didn't tell us. And there was a petting zoo there, and I got to take a selfie with a kangaroo. That was kind of sick. I had a lot of fun doing that. I went by myself, and so that was with a group. I went by myself with a group from my church, which was kind of crazy for me because I had never really done anything like that before with people I didn't know, but I'm adventurous. I can make friends with people, and so I just got to talk with a bunch of people who I wouldn't normally communicate all that much with. What else happened in 2024? It was an election year. I don't really like to talk about stuff like that, but Donald Trump won the 2024 election after Joe Biden resigned the presidency to Kamala Harris. And then Kamala Harris, she ran against Donald Trump, and Trump won. Watching election night was kind of insane because there were states that were red that should not have been red, and there were states that were blue that should not have been blue. And then one of my friends was watching it with the Subway Surfers gameplay playing on a different window below it, and that was so funny. I got a real kick out of that one. And then after the backlash of last year's college football playoff, so the college football playoff used to be 4 teams, and it was selected by a panel of people. And so the 4 teams that went to the college football playoff last year were Washington, the University of Washington, Alabama, because why? Texas, and Michigan, University of Michigan. And so those were the 4 teams. But Florida State was a team that had not lost in the regular season, but their quarterback was injured, so they weren't going to be as entertaining of a team to watch in the playoff. So a group of panelists decided that, hey, Alabama Crimson Tide, despite losing their conference championship over, I believe, Georgia was who they played, they're going to go in and play Michigan because we're going to get better ratings out of Michigan, Alabama than Michigan, Florida State. So they did that, and everybody went insane. And so what they said was, we're not going to fix anything about the playoff this year. We're going to switch it to a 12-man playoff next year. And that's what's happening right now. And we're in the midst of the 12-man college football playoff at the moment, with the top 4 seeds being the conference winners of Oregon for the Big Ten, Arizona State, Boise State, and Georgia for the SEC. And so what happened was all 4 of those teams got eliminated because they had a 1-week break from the hot streak they had in the season. And so we're not seeing the best teams in college football play in the college football playoff anymore. We're seeing the best teams of the college football playoff. And so it's interesting to see that the 4 teams in the semifinal for the national championship right now are Penn State and Notre Dame and Texas and Ohio State. And Ohio State is the favorite to win the national championship right now. And none of the top 4 seeds, none of the conference champions are in the semifinal. Like, that's wild. And it's all just because they had a 1-week break. And I say this in, like, some of my stuff, too. It's like I can't have a day off when I'm going crazy, when I'm in a hot streak. I can't have a day off because I'm gonna stumble. And what happens when they get a week off in the college football playoff? They stumble hard. And it's insane to watch. And there's only been one game that I've enjoyed watching, and that was Arizona State playing Texas. And that was an 8-point game in double overtime. And I thought that game was insane. I watched Arizona State come back 16 points in the last 5 minutes, and they almost won. They could have won, and I was really, really sad that they didn't. But Texas has Quinn Ewers, and I think he's going to do really, really well. But I think Ohio State's going to give Texas a run for their money, and I think Penn State's going to give Notre Dame a run for their money. And so my prediction right now is it's Ohio State and Penn State, and then Penn State taking the national championship. But that all could be wrong. Who even knows? With the playoff that we've been seeing so far, I don't even know what's going to happen. This is insane. We've never seen anything like this happen in the entire sport of college football. In college football, the playoff is the best of the best, and when you see people stumbling like this, you don't really have that anymore, and I'm shocked. That's insane to think about. But yeah, and then what makes matters worse is the bowl games, because if your team does well enough throughout the season, you get to play a bowl game to have the winner of this bowl. And so University of Minnesota is playing Virginia Tech in the Duke Mayo Bowl. Michigan is playing Alabama again. And that's crazy to think about because they're both very different teams this year. And Alabama is going to play Michigan. But anyway, this year's bowl season has just been kind of insane. And the college football playoff bracket has something to do with that. And I don't know what it is, but that's my take on everything. But anyway, that's going to do it for this recap episode of For the Gram. If you liked what you heard, feel free to follow me on Instagram at forthegrahampod@gmail.com, or you can send me an email with any feedback you may have at forthegrahampod@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening to this podcast. This has really been a wild ride for me, and I'm super, super excited to get to continue it in the new year. I have a lot of fun stuff planned and ready to go. But with that all being said, I hope you all had a great 2024, and hats off to the new year. Thank you all for listening to this episode, and I will see you in the next one.